In homeless people can still take over the streets news, the Ninth Circuit has somewhat disappointingly continued to order that towns and cities cannot force homeless people off the streets unless there's sufficient shelters, which they can't build because no one wants them in their own backyard, and due to housing regulations and all the rest of it, and due to expenses. So the homeless problem is a problem in many places. Many people have dealt with it in different ways. But in California, notably, they allow people to just sit on the streets and take them over, which shouldn't be a thing because the public streets belong to the public in a public way. They're for everybody. That is the nature of it. So when someone sets up a little camp, they necessarily take a piece of it away from everybody, right? So they deprive everyone of access to it because only that person has access to it. But, the fact that we allow people to take over public property and, also leads to massive issues with these just drug corridors and drug use and literal poo on the sidewalks and all the rest of it. That's not a problem. So unless you build more shelters, which, they can't do because no one wants them. They couldn't afford them even if they could because, everyone wants them to be, super great. So California apparently still stuck with the problem. Let's learn a little bit more about this. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the Court of Appeals for the entire Western United States, once again refused to let cities and towns force homeless people off the streets unless communities actually provide shelters for them, which, they can't do. There's no way that you could build enough shelters. They're way too expensive. No one will let you build them. No one wants them in their backyard because of decreasing values. No one wants to live next to, a building full of homeless people. So you can't actually get it done. Cities in large and small in the West Coast have tried and failed to overturn the court's ruling for years, later of which came from Oregon. Maybe the Supreme Court will take a look at it. Maybe that's the only hope at this point. The Supreme Court will take a look at it and be like, actually, no, the public property belongs to everybody, and no person can take it. And also, there's no duty, right? So it's like, if not here, where will they go? A perfectly reasonable legal response to that is not my problem, right? So, because that's part of the American ethos in some response. The government doesn't interfere with you. That's at least what the Constitution is all about. The government not interfering with you. The government, it doesn't have to do very much for you actively. They don't have to. They can choose to, but they don't have to, right? So if you have, a public space that belongs to the public, and it's like, well, I have nowhere else to go. Okay, well, that's really unfortunate for you. I'm sorry about that and all, but that's not my problem as a member of the public. We're not interfering with you. We're not preventing you from going somewhere. You don't have the resources. That is not our problem. We can arrest you. We can detain you. We can tell you not to be there. Figure something else out. Not our problem. So maybe the Ninth Circuit will do that and reinvigorate our cities, because I'm sure the people of California are getting a little bit tired of the Skid Row drug den. One mayor said, we're having a situation where the police were telling homeless people they couldn't sleep in public or private property. And eventually that kind of boiled down to homeless people feeling like they couldn't find a place to rest where they weren't being harassed, which, yeah, but that's not a problem. The government is not obligated to provide you stuff. The government is obligated to stay out of your way to the extent they're obligated to do something. If they want to do stuff, that's okay, but they're not obligated to. So the streets do not belong to you. They belong to everyone, and people can't use them because you have made them completely unhospitable. The mayor who was quoted for this article says the ruling highlights deep political divisions in both the city and country. There are currently a few solutions on the table, which none of those solutions will actually be implemented because people don't want them. There's been so much discussion and controversy in the community that we're kind of at a standstill what to do about it. Yeah, no one wants to do anything about it. Because provide them shelters. Okay, but what are the shelters like? And then, where are they going to be? How are they going to do? And some of them get really, really expensive because it's California, right? Only the best shelters will do. So they each have to have individual rooms with kitchens and toilets. They have to have, these luxury palaces that cost $100,000 each. It gets kind of expensive when you're in California. This court has dictated Los Angeles' response to the homeless crisis for years. The city was forced to accept encampment because of a staggering shortage of shelters, which they can't build more because people won't let them. This is just generally a problem with property in California in general. It's really difficult to build new construction, right? Why is housing so expensive? Because people want to live there. Well, why not just build more multi-purpose housing, multi-housing? Because you can't. People are so devoted to, their present property and their property going up in value, right? If you actually were able to build a new multi-tenant property, it might drive prices down and hurt people who already own property. So you can't get it done. Also, it's really, really expensive. So there's that. The Ninth Circuit, for its part, was more divided in this case than it had been in previous iterations because President Donald Trump appointed some judges who were like, this is some BS. Those judges claimed that the homeless, by occupying the public space, are destroying the quality of life in many cities, which seems readily apparent. Readily apparent. Homelessness is presently the defining public health and safety crisis in the Western United States, wrote the conservative judge who dissented. There are stretches of Los Angeles where one cannot help but think the government has shirked its most basic responsibilities under the social contract, providing public safety and ensuring that public spaces remain open to all. Open to all. That's the key. The public spaces belong to the public collectively. They don't belong to any individual person. You can't sleep there. You can't camp there. It's not for you. It's not your property. Go find somewhere else. Not here. Public experts have said the decision shows how Trump appointments have influenced the Ninth Circuit. The decision really shows the break in the Ninth Circuit. It shows how much President Trump's judicial nominees have changed the Ninth Circuit in the sense there's now a conservative solid block. But the decision here means that we maintain the status quo unless the U.S. Supreme Court gets involved, and God can only hope. Because the U.S. Supreme Court might actually try to take this case. I pray they will, because this has got to stop. This has got to stop. The Ninth Circuit has been trying to make this work for decades at this point with absolutely no end in sight. It is interfering with people's rights, and they should say that, hey, people don't have a right to the public space. This is not a thing you have rights to, because they don't. The latest homeless count shows the unhoused population surging in Venice and West LA. Many believe the status quo needs to be improved, but no one actually wants to do it. Someone who lived on the west side of the past 4.5 years raising a son agrees with the court decision to allow camping where there's nowhere else to go, at least providing an option where there's shelter. So for people on the street, there's an option to go somewhere where you have a roof over your head. Yeah, but there isn't, though. There isn't, though. There are not enough shelters for everyone, and you can't build more because the NIMBY people will not let you, because it hurts their value, and also they don't want to listen. They don't want to live next to homeless people, because those homeless people tend to have mental health problems and tend to have drug addiction problems and tend to have other things that somewhat decrease the quality of the neighborhood, so no one wants to build it for them. Others believe the court ruling will cut down on harassment of the unhoused. I think people are getting called too much to come out and deal with the issues between those who are homeless and just trying to find a place to lay down. Yeah, but it's decreasing the quality of life for the community at large and hurting the overall community. The community at large should be able to control its community and say, you can't do that. Thus, for the moment, that brings us to the end of this decision by the Ninth Circuit, which is a reaffirmation of a decision the Ninth Circuit has made multiple times in the past. Every once in a while, this decision gets basically reheard by the Ninth Circuit, and for decades now, they've been refusing to do anything about the issue, saying cities cannot displace the homeless people off the streets unless they have somewhere to put them, and they can't find somewhere to put them because of all the problems I've been mentioning. So there's a lot of issues there. So I sort of hope that the U.S. Supreme Court will eventually take a look at this, because this has got to stop, and hopefully reverse this. At least for a moment, that brings us to the end of discussion of this story.